All right, I'm gonna get us started. For those that don't know me, I'm Lauren Dubay. I'm the director of all good things at Climate First Bank. Today, one of those good things is that we're hosting a special live edition of our Green Note podcast, where we're going to screen Back to Camp 41, Tom Lovejoy's final journey to the Amazon. This film is a tribute to his life and legacy as the godfather of biodiversity. And following the film, we'll have a Q&A session of our panelists and take questions from you guys as well. But before we jump into the film, I'd like to briefly introduce the other folks I have here with me today who helped make the film possible. First, we have one of Dr. Lovejoy's daughters, Kata Petty. She is a green architect and biodiversity activist. She works to continue her father's legacy through conservation and storytelling. She also serves on the board of SustainaFest, the organization behind today's film, and supports the Lovejoy Award Fellowship and the Lovejoy Center at the University of Arizona. So hi, Kata. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Next, we have my good friend, George Chmael. He's the CEO of Council Fire and the board chair of SustainaFest. He's a former corporate lawyer turned social entrepreneur. We need to have a whole podcast about that story one day, I think. George leads Council Fire and provides economic, environmental, and social impact services to clients across the globe. And he launched SustainaFest over a decade ago to drive global change through storytelling. And he's an executive producer of today's film. So, hi, George.
Thanks, Lauren.
And next, but not last, or last but not least, we have Rob Bierregaard. He is the research associate at the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University. In addition to being a longtime friend and colleague of Dr. Lovejoy's and the first field director of his brainchild, the Biological Dynamics of Forest Fragments Project. That was a mouthful. But Rob is a raptor ecologist who studied barn owls and ospreys extensively, and he's known for tracking ospreys migration and is the author of the famous book, Bell's Journey. So hi, Rob.
Thank you. Hi.
Yeah. Before we just jump right into the film, do you guys all just want to just say hi and maybe share just a little quick note about what you're really hoping that the audience will take away from this film? And then we'll kick off the film, which only runs a little over 20 minutes, and then jump into some really great questions with our three panelists. But Kata, do you want to start by just sharing what you're hoping everyone will take away?
Sure, yeah. And thank you so much, Lauren, for the introduction. I'm super excited to be part of this podcast, especially with Rob and George, who I know very well. And I'm excited for everyone to see this film. I think what's so great about this film is that there are a lot of different takeaways. There are sort of, kind of the two main stories I think about. The story of my father's project and work and of course all the science behind that. And then there's the personal story of my family bringing my father's ashes back down to Camp 41. But then there are several other kind of themes that weave throughout the whole film that are touched on, and things like the importance of working with other people to accomplish your goals, the importance of engaging and educating the next generation of conservationists coming up, the idea that everybody can make a difference, and there's a big theme of hope and optimism. So my hope for everybody watching this film is that because there is so much to take away, that everybody comes away with feeling inspired to act.
Thanks, Kata. I know I did. I really enjoyed the first time I watched it. I'm excited to watch it again. George, what about you?
I think Kata said pretty much everything I would have said. I do, these are times when we need inspiration, and it's hard to come by. And so I hope that the film and the conversation inspires everyone, provides a little education, but also inspires them to continue to work hard at the things that matter most to them, and to recognize that when we come together, we can drive significant impact. And that's what we need to do moving forward. So, and I also want to thank Climate First Bank for sponsoring the screening and partnering with SustainaFest on such an important topic. And you, Lauren, for leading us through the hour. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, George. Rob, what about you?
They said it all. I think the bottom line is that, and what people should take out of this is hope, and maybe some understanding. Sorry about that. So hope and understanding of the rainforest and how biodiversity and the global climate change is interconnected in scary ways, and a little bit of wonder about how cool the Amazon is when you get to see it up close. There's some great images in the film, so I think the film speaks for itself. I don't think people need really a guide to watching this. It's so well done that the message is obvious for all. So pay attention. That's my message.
I love it. All right, Maria, you want to kick us off?
As a kid, I was interested in animals. I liked to be outdoors in nature. At one point, my father decided it would be good for me to go away to school. The first school on the list to visit is called the Millbrook School. And when I got there and discovered the school had a zoo, I decided this is where I want to go. So before I was 15, I understood the outline of life on Earth that was, as it was then known to be. Today we would call that biodiversity, right? And I've never been able to get enough of it.
To the world, Dr. Tom Lovejoy was known as the godfather of biodiversity. To my mom and 2 aunts, he was known as Papa. And to me, my sister, and 4 cousins, he was Vovo, our dear grandfather. Vovo was a scientific giant, a naturalist who, with E.O. Wilson, pioneered the field of conservation biology. He conceived the debt for nature swap concept. He was also a longtime National Geographic explorer at large, a senior fellow at the United Nations Foundation, a professor and founding scientific director at the Institute for a Sustainable Earth at George Mason University, the chief biodiversity advisor to the World Bank, and the first scientist ever hired by the World Wildlife Fund.
Tom was obsessed by the forests of the Amazon. It would perhaps be too glib to say that he could identify every bird he glimpsed fluttering through its branches, and every tiny mammal that he caught in the light of his torch. But I know I would have been better informed after a walk with him through the depths of those forests than with anyone else I have ever known.
He knew the importance of bringing people together, the power of that, and the power of putting the work into relationships, because, you can be doing all the science and, gathering all the data and stuff, but, the relationship to other people to make things happen is just as important as getting all the data.
You can make a difference as an individual. You can make a difference as a group, but you can also make a difference as an individual. And some of it is about educating yourself. Some of it is about sharing with others. The way you live can make an impact.
Vovo left us on Christmas Day 2021, his favorite day of the year. Today, our family and some close friends are returning with Vovo's ashes to the Amazon, where he devoted most of his life to understanding and protecting.
Yeah, well, we've been bringing Papa back to Brazil, back to Camp 41. Back to the Amazon. And some other important places that were near and dear to him when he came down. When he was in the hospital in December, before he passed, he, with a twinkle in his eye like he usually does, he sort of crooked smile and said, "Well, I guess I'm taking you on one last adventure." And I think he knew that that's because this is where we were going to be bringing him.
And so at a certain point, I was looking for, what's next. The World Wildlife Fund, the United States, was looking for a project administrator. So I went there, I thought, for 2 years, and ended up staying 14. And we actually decided at the time that WWF would concentrate on the New World and the New World tropics. The Amazon was this incredibly important piece on the single largest repository of biodiversity on Earth. We were going to be smart about conservation. And one of those was habitat fragmentation, which of course became one of the main things that I engaged in.
We woke up very early at the hotel, around 3 or 3:30, depending, and we loaded up at 4 a.m. so that we could take this crazy trip up to the bird tower, which was our first stop on our trip. And we loaded into a bus initially that would kind of burn some miles to a place where we could no longer take the bus, and we had to offload into trucks. And we had, I think, 6 or 7 trucks, 4 or 5 to a truck, and we bounced down some very muddy roads, just really first gear, second gear, bumping, grinding, sliding, slipping.
We stopped at the bird tower, climbed the bird tower, and spent a good amount of time up there looking at birds and different trees and things that he loved.
So this is the oldest observation tower anywhere in the Amazon. It's built in the 70s, and it hadn't received any real serious maintenance until about 5 years ago. So it was a 40-year-old tower at that point. So it's contributed a lot to understanding Amazon forest and to tourism. It's become a really prized destination that all bird watchers that know anything about the Amazon want to come to.
He didn't tell us a lot about what he wanted, and he really didn't tell us anything about what he wanted, but the one very, very clear instruction was that he wanted his ashes back at Camp 41.
So everybody who would like to, take a little pinch and return Papa. Sure.
Many more hours in the trucks. You go from being on this muddy, slippery, kind of little scary road for many hours, where there's actually a lot of sun, and then you come to this like a little boardwalk area where the cars park, and then there's this. It's almost like there's like a hole in the forest, and it's dark.
A dark hole.
It's really dark.
Yeah.
And then at the end of, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of a mile, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
You come into the camp and you can kind of see a light in this like dark tunnel going through the forest, and then it just opens up, and there's hammocks and different color hammocks, and it's very, in my opinion, very welcoming and comforting to come into this sunny, beautiful camp.
Camp 41 is the world-renowned site that is home to the longest continuously running scientific research station in the Amazon. This collection of tin-roofed buildings, hammocks, and a rustic lab sit among a 620 square mile area where some of the most important Amazonian research has taken place.
Camp 41 is our grandfather's camp where we are today, and this is the big return.
So that's why it's back to Camp 41?
That's why it's back to Camp 41.
And you're not the only one wearing the hat?
And also, I don't have mine on, but I have one.
Bobo's back.
Papa expressed that this is where he wanted to come back to Camp 41.
Personally, for me, I haven't been back to Camp 41 in so many years.
Yeah.
And it was not just wonderful for me for why we are here this time, but just kind of to touch back on a part of me. Mm-hmm. But this is the hard part. The first thing that I saw when I came to camp was the memorial.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So they had a beautiful memorial created for Papa that will be there always.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's a little garden. They tended to the garden.
Yeah.
And they just made it really special.
Tom requested that his ashes be spread at Camp 41, which is the main camp, the biggest camp of the Biological Dynamics of Forest Fragments project, which he started. And it's a place, Camp 41 is a place he came back to every New Year's Eve with a group of different folks each time, sometimes family, sometimes close friends, often important movers and shakers in conservation, and a place that he just loved and felt very comfortable in. And so for us, it's very touching and special that he felt the same way we all do about this place. In honor of his wishes to be partially left here, we've put up a plaque that says, that gives a quote of Tom's, of how much he loves nature. Well, part of the mission is a new mission, of course, which is spreading his ashes in strategic places, in camp and elsewhere. Otherwise, while we're here, what we're doing is, in many ways, repeating the same routine that he did with his visitors. We're bird watching, we're talking about nature, we're going on walks.
But we spent the 3 days mostly socializing and sharing memories about Papa and just enjoying each other's company, and also education from the field experts and from Mario and Hita, taking walks through the forest and learning about the kinds of things that students are studying there.
Over the years of taking people to Camp 41, I have found that the less that I lecture at people while they're there, the better the experience it is. And in my ideal trips, we go for 3 nights. Right? Well, that means that whoever it is has had to listen to the forest for 3 days and 3 nights. And they can't help but internalize that it's a living planet that we live on and benefit from. It affects them in a way that beyond just sheer logic.
We're probably one of the few projects that can give straight answers about the changes of the past 40 years.
So here is probably the best example in the world that we have very nice, alive library of trees that we know a lot of things about.
So we're going for a walk in the woods, only you're right in the middle of the Amazon. Is this as different as you expected? Is it similar to what you've seen before? What do you think? Any impressions?
Mario channels his inner Tom in leading this sort of thing, but Tom would be doing just what we're doing and pointing out as we go along. He's pointing out the cool things like the leafcutter colony and the ants across the path. And
Tom's expertise went far beyond the mere identification of species. He used it to ask questions that few, it seems, had ever bothered to ask before. How old is this particular patch of forest? How many different species does it contain? Or, to put it more concisely, what is its biological diversity? A term, often shortened to biodiversity, that many say Tom himself invented. He was certainly one of the very first to define it and to study what it describes.
What is the purpose of sharing this with people?
Well, the deep purpose, of course, is to have people, once they get to know and love a place, that's the only time you're going to fight to defend it. And so this is Tom's way of introducing people, and he brought an amazing cast of characters here. Congressional delegations with senators and representatives and all sorts of other luminaries, Tom Cruise, and so he was all about spreading the word, basically, that there's this amazing resource for the planet that we all need, and not just because it's pretty, but it's because it does so much for the whole world ecosystem.
So basically, it was a giant experiment, and the whole idea was to have the clearing go on for these ranches to leave fragments of 1 hectare and 10 hectare and 100 hectares and 1,000 hectares to have matching plots of the same size in continuous forest, so you could make a real comparison. And you'd had to have, simple camps to support the students and the researchers who are working out in the forest. Camp 41 is the camp that is 41 kilometers from the nearest highway. And it's basically in continuous forest. So it's close to unbroken forest from there to the Guianas.
New Year's Eve morning, we sent part of Papa in these little...
New Year's Day. New Year's Day,
sorry. We found a little Brazil nut, dried out, empty Brazil nut casings, shells, and filled them with his ashes, and everyone took a turn putting 1 or 2 of the little Brazil nuts in the stream to send him down towards Belém. Yeah. And then we followed that with leaving some ashes at the base of the memorial where the plants are. So that, and there's plants now on top of where he is. So he'll always be in the camp and in his stream.
Yep. After being at Camp 41, the next spot that was very special to Papa is the meeting of the waters, where the Amazon River and the Rio Negro come together. And so we decided we would rent a riverboat for our big group and visit the waters and scatter his ashes into the meeting of the waters, and then go on a journey to see more of what he loved about the Brazilian Amazon, and also to come visit the community that is hosting his elementary school.
Peter, where are we going?
We're going to the Comunidade Tumbira. So you're going to go up those steps, and then there is a school up here that is named after Thomas Lovejoy. So we're going to visit the school, and I think you're going to leave a little bit of his ashes in the garden in front of the school that is named after him.
I think young people are the hope. they got to be telling us to do our job better. I mean, quite vigorously. Right? Nature really doesn't have a seat at the table. We haven't figured out how to do that right yet. A lot of this impact on nature is because we don't keep account of its value. But that's where we need to be looking at, something that cuts across all this immediate imperative to get nature out of the way to do something, right? And put some value on it and say, now wait a minute. Yeah. There needs to be a place for nature in all of this.
Vovo always spoke of hope. He warned that the Amazon will hit a tipping point when 20 to 25% of the forest cover is lost. Cross that tipping point and the ecosystem begins to irreversibly collapse. If we destroy the Amazon, the rest of the planet will follow. It is estimated that 15% of the Amazon has been destroyed to date. In spite of this, Vovo would suggest that there is still time to save. If not the entire Amazon, then most of it. If not every species, then the great majority. Without hope, Vovo would say, there is no point. Optimism is our only option.
For him to try to impress upon everybody that that there's hope for, whatever cause, whatever you're working for, that no matter how daunting it feels, you have to have hope, because what did he say? If you don't have hope, then what is there?
How can those of us who knew Tom personally describe this extraordinary, influential, and lovable man? The word that comes to my mind is radiant. He had the broadest and most infectious smile I've ever known. But if in 20 years' time the world is truly on the way to recovery, if humanity has eventually succeeded in developing self-discipline, if the forests of the Amazon still stand over sufficient areas to enable them to maintain the stability of the world's climate, then this will be, in part, because Tom worked so hard, so expertly, and with such devotion to bring environmental wisdom to the world.
Mockingbird, sing me to sleep, keep my soul to keep your song still in my heart, never to part. La 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 la, still in my heart, still in my heart.
Wow. Thanks, Maria. What a great film. I feel like I get a little teary-eyed every time I watch it. And he wasn't even my pup, so what a beautiful legacy. Well, I guess just to jump right into it, I mean, that obviously isn't your like typical science-oriented film, even though it does include narration by David Attenborough, which is kind of your classic science-based documentary narrator, which I love that he was a part of that. But George, tell us a little bit about how this project started.
Sure, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, as you can tell, there's a little bit of emotion involved in this particular project. Not all of our film projects are so personal. Not only does Tom have an incredible family, we're all fortunate to have Kata with us today, but her two sisters, and I'm fortunate enough to count them as friends. But of course, Dr. Lovejoy himself, unparalleled scientist, one of the greatest scientists and science communicators that I've ever known. I think the world has ever known. And so it's a funny story. This was not intended for a public audience. I'll talk about a project a little further down the line that we were capturing this footage for when we were lucky enough to accompany the family down to back to Camp 41. But we thought we'd mix a film for the family because it was such an emotional and an important event. And we ended up through a long twisted tale utilizing Sir David Attenborough's narration. And as it came together, we thought, okay, this is probably something we should share with the general public. We still have much bigger plans to capture Tom's legacy, but at least this did a little bit of that. And it's always been astounding to me that as one of the greatest scientists in the world, he's not been featured and his story hasn't been told in the way that it deserves. And so this was our attempt to begin to do that. And we're optimistic that we'll be bringing more of his work and his influence through other projects.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a perfect 20 minutes, but it definitely had me asking so many more questions and wanting to learn more about his work and his legacy. So if that was the intention, it did an excellent job at keeping my curiosity going, because I think I spent 30 to 45 minutes after I watched the film for the first time just learning more about his work. So but Kata, what about from you and your family? I mean, obviously if it started as kind of a personal project, but how did you all decide that you wanted to put a public
So I remember exactly the moment when George he was at our house and he kind of pitched this idea to us, and this was I don't know, George, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably 5 years before he passed away. So at that time, it was really a different story. It was really, just more about his work. Of course, I was immediately supportive because, like George mentioned, there are more people that need to know about it and to understand the legacy. And so I thought, well, this is really important for his legacy, especially for people outside of the scientific community. I think, not enough people really knew what he was doing and why it was so important. And then, of course, when he passed away, it changed. As George also mentioned, initially it was supposed to be a family story, really just for us, but it evolved. And, it actually evolved. To me, it evolved in a very natural way. The fact that George is a longtime friend certainly helped myself and my sisters, feel more open. And I think in a way, through the grieving process, it actually kind of helped to have it on film and for other people to, to share it with other people. But ultimately, the film is our wish, of course, was for it to be inspiring in order for his legacy to continue. And I think that George and Greg and Zach did an amazing job, pulling all those things together into one story. So yeah, we were very, very supportive of the idea.
Yeah, I love it. Rob, I would love to hear more about the science behind Dr. Lovejoy's work. Can you tell us a little bit more about habit fragmentation and biodiversity? I know that there's probably a whole podcast in and of itself for that, but I know a lot of my teammates are on the call and interested in hearing about how all that's connected to climate change. So share with us, give us your wisdom.
Sure, you got an hour or two?
Sure, yeah.
I always refer to the Forest Fragments Project as Tom's brainchild and my baby. So Tom came up with this idea, this wildly extravagant and presumably it should have been impossible to pull off idea of going to the rainforest and manipulating some areas where cattle ranchers were cutting down rainforest. By law in Brazil, they have to leave 50% of the forest standing of their allotment. And so Tom said, well, let's go in there before they're cutting down the forest and see whether we can collect data before these habitat islands or habitat fragments are created. So we have data, what species were in these patches of forest at different sizes before and after the isolation, and then follow them over a long period of time to see how they change. And for that, we're going to want a control area. We're going to want a patch of forest that is not disturbed, but it's close by. So it's basically the same flora and fauna, but in continuous forest. So Tom dropped me off in 1979, said, here, make this project happen. And I came back 8 years later, at first concerned that how could this project survive without me? And then I realized that, well, if you set up a project for 8 years and it doesn't survive without you, you didn't do a very good job of setting it up. And so the biggest feather in my cap now is that 35 years later, the project is still going strong. And it's the longest standing continuous biological survey in the Amazonian rainforest. And we've seen some really interesting things. So habitat fragmentation is basically taking continuous habitat of any sort, prairies or forests or whatever, and turning it into a checkerboard of patches of the original habitat surrounded by some kind of man-altered habitat like cornfields or whatever, and then just tracking what's going on. In those patches, there were a lot of discussion at the time about how big, the bottom line question is, how big should a nature reserve be to be an effective nature reserve? And then, so we hired everybody we could find that could count birds or butterflies or monkeys or snakes and frogs, and we set them all out into the forest and to do their inventories before the forest fragments were isolated, and then we continue to do the monitoring afterwards. So that's habitat fragmentation. Biodiversity is just a term to describe the richness of life in an ecosystem, how many species there are, and how complex the interrelationships between those species are. That's a part of the ecosystem. It's not just the species that are there, but it's how the species interact. So flowers need hummingbirds or bees to be pollinated, and so it's a living, functioning system. And the real godfather of conservation biology, Aldo Leopold, said that the most important concept in tinkering is to save all the pieces. And so we are tinkering with the world's ecosystems, and every species that goes extinct is a piece of the puzzle that's lost, and we don't know how important each of those pieces are. So you want to save all the pieces, and that's what conservation is all about. So that's sort of biodiversity and habitat fragmentation and what the project was all about. When we're talking about sort of the bigger picture of biodiversity and climate change, it's a one-way street where climate change is driving biodiversity down. And one of the scary things we found out with our 40+ year database is that some of the birds in the understory of the forest around Camp 41, which, as Tom said, a monkey could go from Camp 41 to the Guianan Shield without getting on the ground. So that's continuous forest, and we thought that wouldn't be affected by climate change, but our research shows that some of the birds in the understory of the forests around Camp 41 are having increased mortality when on the hotter and dry seasons. So what we thought was still pristine and intact and protected forests is actually already showing signs of negative effects of climate change.
Yeah, that's the stat that's at, I think, towards the end of the film, where he talks about, was it if 20 or 25% of the Amazon is lost, then we're all lost. And sounds like such a small number when you think about the vastness of the rainforest, but the fact that that holds so much power in terms of just our whole global ecosystem is kind of scary. And also the fact that 15% is or something that is already gone. But I really liked that you all connected that type of scary statistic with the fact that optimism though is our only option of moving forward. And for me, I think, and a lot of us that are in the space get really hung up on those like really scary statistics, but constantly being reminded that like optimism is the only way forward. It's our only choice. Hope is what's going to get us there is really resonated with me, at least.
The climate issue locally is that the rainforest generates 50% of its own rain. So you could see in those overview drone shots of the tower, you could see wisps of mist coming up out of the rainforest. So most of the rainforest that falls on the rainforest was generated by rainstorms, that evaporation just to the east. The weather goes from east to west. And when it hits the Andes, it gets deflected down. And so most of the rainfall that falls on the agricultural breadbasket of South America is coming out of the rainforest. So if this rainforest, the first tipping point is the rainforest makes its own rain. So if you cut down too much of it, it's not going to have enough rain to sustain the trees. And then once the rainforest is gone, then all the agricultural districts, regions in south of the Amazon are going to be hit by severe droughts. So it's scary stuff indeed.
Yeah. Kata, I think to bring us back to the optimism is the only way forward. I really like what your father said in the film about like the less that I lecture at people when we're out in the forest, the better their experiences. And it sounded like he had a lot of talents in how he connected people to nature. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, and George mentioned this, I think, at the very beginning of the podcast, that he was this incredible communicator of science, right? So in talking to people, he could explain very complex issues in a way that anybody could understand it. So he's reaching a lot of people who would normally, just sort of eyes glaze over and not understand the issue. So number one, that was a really, really, unique talent that he had in connecting people. But then of course, he realized the value of taking people into the forest and for them to be experiencing it firsthand, knowing that experience really is, it hits them in an emotional level just as much as intellectually. And so this, once you're connected to that, you feel more protective of it. And when you're in the Amazon, I mean, it's quite an experience. The smells, the noises, just visually, it's stunning. And I think people who go down there, they don't forget that. That's something that's like can be a life-changing experience for people. So I think it was kind of that combination of taking people into the forest so they're experiencing it firsthand, and then they make that emotional connection to it. And then not talking too much And when he was explaining things, it was just very simple, simply said. So that combination, I think, is unique as a scientist, and he was remarkable with that.
And he went one step further, Kata. I mean, I've never met anyone who had the talent that he had to bring people together.
Yeah.
So the interviews when Tom's older, that was one of his final interviews. The house behind him is his home of the
Yeah.
last 30 plus years. And it became famous among conservationists because Tom would host dinners there and he would curate the attendee list to put people together that had a reason in his mind to talk, or maybe they had conflicting opinions on things. And so he was a master networker as well, and he traveled the globe advising leaders of countries and the United Nations and 4 presidents of the United States.
Yeah.
His current president could use some advice in this regard, but really, really incredible in the way that it was about more than just the science. And so many of us know scientists who are incredibly talented, went in a lab or in the field, head down, doing their work. But Tom, it seems to me his greatest superpower was that ability to connect people and to spur conversation and collaboration.
Yeah, and a lot of times they had no idea why they were there. Like he just kind of let it happen naturally, right? The conversation, and I think a lot of big ideas came out of his dinners around the dinner table, which also probably helped that he had an amazing wine cellar. And just a little side note, that his dining room table, where so many of these famous conversations took place, is now at the University of Arizona Lovejoy Center. And so they bring people together at the table, same table, to have these kinds of discussions. So that's kind of fun that is still going.
That's really special.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I feel like a lot of times, I don't know if this is relatable content or anyone else, but I feel like a lot of times I feel very overwhelmed with trying to figure out what we can do as individuals, and the fact that it is as simple as inviting people to the table.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like, almost too simple, but having conversation, inspiring each other, being authentic with one another, and that goes a really long way.
Exactly.
Oh, that's really special. I'll have to see if I can check out that table one day. Well, let's talk a little bit. I mean, Rob, you had just talked about habit fragmentation, but there's, I think, a broader context to fragmentation. So, George, what do you think about the concept of fragmentation as it's relevant in other contexts?
Yeah, so that's actually, we keep harking back to the historical arc of this work. And as Kata mentioned, we were actually working with her father prior to COVID on the development of a television series that was going to not only capture his legacy, but to leverage the far reaches of his scientific work that go well beyond the science of ecology. So we had a concept with Tom's support and development, the idea that habitat fragmentation has application in social and economic contexts as well. So it's not just, you take out a hectare of forest and you see the decline in species populations. When you think about the fragmentation that we're experiencing socially around the world, whether it's systemic racism or environmental justice issues or what have you, as we've fragmented our own societies, we've seen the negative impacts of that. And so Tom's concepts, of course, had application in ecological context, but have been picked up and taken by other social scientists, economists, and others to help explain what's happening in those fields of study. And reach is incredible. When we had our world premiere of this film at the DC Environmental Film Festival last year, which was the largest environmental film festival in the world, we were fortunate enough to screen at the National Portrait Gallery, 350-seat auditorium. In addition to feeling like a love fest, it felt like everybody in the crowd knew Tom or had, their career had been influenced by him, or their family members. It was emotional. I was a wreck. It was really incredible. But we had someone in the crowd. We had several comments about Tom's influence, but one person mentioned that his work had extended into drug enforcement activities, right? They had leveraged off of his scientific work to think about how it was that they could intervene on drug enforcement activities. And so, while not the nicest topic, it was just another indication of how far Tom's scientific work stretched into other aspects of our daily lives. And so, that television series is still in development. We can talk about it later, but obviously with Tom's passing, there need to be a change in the plans on that. COVID didn't help either. But yeah, fragmentation and all of the learnings of Tom's science and the great work that Rob and the hundreds of scientists who have done seminal work in the Amazon stretches across all aspects of our lives.
Rob, do you have anything to add to that in terms of fragmentation and our disconnect from nature?
Yeah, I was just about to take that leap of the one of the setups you had in the questions was talking about how people are disconnected from nature and how important or how scary that is. And it gets to the whole question of you're not going to protect something you don't love, and you're not going to love it if you don't understand it, or at least know it's around you. So that getting people connected with the world, even in their backyard, is a huge first step. And most people think that sort of nature is an optional channel we can flip on, like turning on nature after dinner. That's nice that it's out there, but it's not really important to us. So trying to get people to actually pay attention to what's around them, what's in their backyard. The Cornell's Merlin bird song identification app is just it's a great thing, because people come up to me who I think would not be interested in birds at all, and someone showed them Merlin, and now they're all excited because they know there's scarlet tanager in their backyard in the spring, and they didn't know about this. And so people are starting to get excited. You begin to pay attention to what's around you. That's the first step in trying to get people to understand that nature isn't an optional add-on to the world. It's what keeps the world habitable for us. And so the more that, I'm always trying to get people to look around and get to know what's in your backyard and in the local parks. And then if we get to take them to the Amazon to show them that's the greatest show on earth. Besides, coral reefs and the Amazon rainforest that's just like Christmas morning for anyone who's interested at all in biology. And that's what it was like for us running our mist nets and banding birds. I was there for 8 years, and every day I went out, there was a chance I was going to find a bird that I'd never seen before in the net. So it was thrilling for someone who is a biologist at heart and profession to be in the Amazon is the greatest show on earth. And getting people to start to make the connection, to open their eyes and their ears and their noses and smell and see and hear what's around them. The more people get to know the nature that they're living in the midst of, there's just that much better chance that they'll do something. They'll take local steps to make a difference in conservation.
Yeah. This is me putting in my formal PTO request that I would like to be a butterfly counter or a bird counter in the Amazon. So we'll gladly count bugs in the Amazon today.
There's plenty of them.
So I guess let's to kind of wrap us around. How do we, like, I mean, storytelling is obviously such an important piece of this. I think storytelling happens around a table when you're bringing people together. It happens in films. It happens when we're out in nature with friends or family. It happens when we're reading books. So, Rob, I know that you also wrote a book called Belle's Journey. So tell us a little bit about how you think storytelling fits into that, and more about your book, Belle's Journey.
Well, that was an unexpected twist in my life trajectory where I had no idea I was going to, no thought about
Maybe
writing.
I left that one unbolded, but I wanted to bring it back.
I spent 15 years putting satellite tracking devices on ospreys, mostly in New England, and then tracking their travels as they migrate from New England down to Brazil and back. And someone suggested one time while we were waiting for an osprey to fall into one of our traps, so why don't you write a book about your favorite osprey? And being very susceptible to suggestion, I did. I had no idea what I was doing, but 5 years later, the book Belle's Journey came out, and probably the coolest thing that happened as a result was I had a father come up to me with his 5-year-old son, and this book is written for people who are at the age, target age range is 8 to 108. I used to say 8 to 80, but then an 84-year-old friend of mine said, "You mean I can't read it?" So anyway, it's sort of middle school and up book. And so this guy came up to me with his 5-year-old son who wanted to meet Dr. B because I'm in the book. And dad said, I don't know how many times I read this book to my son, because every time I get to the end, he just says, "Dad, start again." And so that plucked on some heartstrings. And so that's the kind of thing that maybe that kid, when he grows up, is heading for, he's going to be someone who really loves nature and does something about it. So that's an example of sort of one-on-one. You do one thing, connect to one person, and we make our changes bit by bit and put together. The more people we get out there who care about nature and will do something about it, the better the planet will be. And that's where the hope lies. As Tom said at some point in the movie, the hope is in the next generation. And one thing that's a little scary is this concept of the shifting baseline. So whatever you're born into, that's what you're trying to fight for. But we should really be trying to backtrack and get back to where we were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But anyway, so connecting with individuals and opening up their eyes and showing them the world around them and the cool things that are happening is the way to get them to love nature and do something about it, preserving it.
I love that.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, of course. Everyone, go buy your copy of Belle's Journey, especially Corey, our bird enthusiast. He's been blowing up the chat. I love it, Corey. Kata, what about for your father and for your family? Like, how has storytelling been an important part of sharing his legacy and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, there's so many people, right, that either can't get outside for whatever reason. They can't afford to go to these places, especially a place like the Amazon. So storytelling is critical in reaching those people, right? And when you're watching a film, it's, the imagery, the music, it can really draw you in and give you, or make you have an emotional reaction to it. And like we've talked about, that emotional connection is what makes you want to feel protective about it and act and take some kind of action to help conserve it. So, you know, film is basically the next best thing to being in nature first, you know, physically firsthand. So I think it carries a very high extra responsibility to help connect people to nature, and books too, of course. You know, so I definitely think it can bridge that gap between the people who can't get out there. Yeah.
George, what about what you're doing over at SustainaFest? Do you want to talk a little bit about SustainaFest and the importance of storytelling with your work?
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to add to Rob and Kata's comments about storytelling, but stories have captured all of human history. It's the methodology by which we translate our learnings and our humanity across generations. And so, for us, the idea behind SustainaFest was to leverage that very fact and to help people see themselves in stories such that they make that emotional connection that drives action or, a contribution or investment of time or money. And so that is SustainaFest's mission, is to leverage stories to tackle the greatest challenges of our time and to work with the incredible people out in the field, be they disciples of Tom or others who are working on our biggest environmental, economic, and social challenges, and to assist them in their objectives by helping to bring their stories to life through film or other means. And so I had mentioned previously that we were working on a television series with Tom prior to COVID and his passing. And the idea really is to draw all those components that we've talked about today together, where we can demonstrate the reach of Tom's work across environmental, social, and economic constructs, and tell those inspiring stories of younger folks who stand on Tom's shoulders. Use whatever analogy you may, but who are building on the incredible work that Rob and Tom and others created, dating back 40 some odd years, and to give people hope and to help them see themselves in the story and to give them reason for engaging. And so that's the focus of SustainaFest. That's the intention with the television series that we're calling Planet Lovejoy. And the hope is, for those that have seen Chef's Table on Netflix, it's in a Chef's Table format where we're following an individual and getting to know the person and getting to know the impact of their work and helping people see themselves across that broad spectrum of wildly impactful work that was inspired by Tom. So storytelling's the beginning, middle, and end for SustainaFest.
All right. We have about 10-ish minutes left, and I want to make sure we have enough time for some questions. And but I also feel like our last question that I had is probably one of the most important ones. So I'm going to try my best to give you guys a near impossible task of talking about, and we'll just go one by one. But we talked about how a common throughout this, the documentary is keeping hope that individuals can have. They can, the power of taking action. It's not just something to be done in groups. We all have that power. So if I would love to have each of us kind of go through and say, like, what would you say is something that us as individuals can do to make a difference, big or small, and how are you seeking hope right now? So that's how I'm gonna end it. No pressure. It's a big question, but Kata, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's, obviously there are easier ways, to maintain hope and to take action. I think there's one part of the film that kind of lightly touches on this when my dad started talking about the younger generation. But he doesn't really delve into it too much, but I think it's incredibly important thing that individuals can do. And I think it's something that can, continue the theme of optimism and hope and keeping the work going. And that is the concept of mentorship. So my dad was an incredible mentor and he loved doing it and he touched hundreds of people. Like, it's amazing how many people have come up to me and said, oh, your dad, I met your dad, like talked to him for 15 minutes at a conference 20 years ago, but it made the biggest difference in my professional life. And so, and also for not just young professionals to be mentored, but the younger generation to mentor them, to try to get them to be interested in conservation biology. I think that's it's a really critical, one critical way that people can make an impact to continue, getting people to do the hard work, but it also keeps the hope going, because if these future generations, want to work as hard as my dad did, taking that mentorship job on is, I think, really, really, really impactful.
That's a great one. One I don't hear often, but such an important one.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kata. George, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious ways of volunteering or donating money. There are the less obvious things. Moving your bank accounts to Climate First Bank, for instance, is a great way to do it.
I didn't
right?
pay George to do that, I promise.
But in all honesty, if you think about the footprint of your life and you think about the impact that you have, intentional and unintentional, there are so many opportunities to make a difference. And insurance, the sort of fundamental infrastructure that you'd rather not think about. There's opportunities, right? You compare a Climate First Bank with a more traditional, larger bank that any number of which shall go unnamed, who are funding fossil fuel exploration in the Amazon, right? Or forest destruction in the Amazon today, versus what Climate First Bank is doing. Where does your money sleep at night? With Climate First Bank, your money sleeps in renewable energy projects being developed and constructed. And so there are so many opportunities. Everybody's life is different. Everybody's opportunities vary. But if you look around, look for the obvious, look for the less obvious, there's ways to drive change. And with each act, you maintain that hope. And each individual act, as Rob said earlier, adds up to something larger, And then as we connect, we make all the difference in the world. And, at moments like this here domestically, this is the time that we do have to come together. We have to maintain hope and to work in collaboration to overcome what are seemingly daunting challenges these days. And so there's opportunity. It's all around us. And that's the thing we need to focus on, as opposed to the distressing things that are bombarding us on a daily basis.
There's a lot of them. Rob, what about you? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, Kata and George have touched on the big stuff, and I like to focus on the little things that George mentioned. Going out and find I guarantee your local nature reserve needs someone to go out and rip up invasive plants. So, and it's very rewarding to rip up invasive plants and know that you're putting a little piece of nature back together again. So yeah, get involved. And some people don't have time to do that. So supporting your favorite local conservation organization is a really important thing to do. and spreading the word, getting kids involved and get that next generation hooked. If you've stayed with this podcast this long, you're probably interested enough that you can have an impact on someone young growing up, and take them out and show them the local nature preserve, show them what's in your yard, and turn over some logs and find some salamanders and see all that cool stuff, and get your hands dirty.
Love that.
And give the next generation a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, good advice. Well, if anybody else has questions they want to throw in the chat, I know we only have a few more minutes, so that now is your time to add them to the Q&A, or the chat if I can find them, because it's been kind of busy in there. But Nicole asked about what's the best resource that we can look at to learn more about Dr. Lovejoy's work and how we can support you all in continued research efforts or getting this film out into the world. So tell us how we can engage more.
How do you want to talk about the science opportunities first?
Yeah, sure. So right now there are sort of two larger organizations working to continue his legacy. The first is Alpha, which is in Brazil, and it's the organization that really continues to maintain the camps, the infrastructure, to keep the project going from a physical standpoint. So they've just hired a director, which is great news, because before this new director came on board, it was really my dad who did all the fundraising to keep Alpha going. And so we're kind of back on track, I think, to getting the support directly to Alpha that they need. To support Alpha, you would need to go to the Smithsonian Tropical Research Center, and they have their website. They have a donation page, but you have to earmark it to specifically go to BDFFP, the project down there. So that's one way. The other one is the Lovejoy Center at the University of Arizona, which just over the last year and a half-ish has come together, and their mission is to advance the sciences and biodiversity conservation and policy as well through research and education, and they have some fellowships, and that's all there, pretty easy on their website to support them. If you just Google University of Arizona Lovejoy Center, there's also, I think, the money for that organization you can also give through the University of Arizona Foundation webpage, but again, you'd have to earmark it to specifically go to the Lovejoy Center. So those are kind of the two main ways right now. We're working on a third one, the Lovejoy Award Fellowship, which was once at the Wilson Center, but unfortunately completely dismantled recently. So we're working on finding a new home for that program as well.
All good resources. Thanks, George, for putting them in the chat for everyone too. We'll make sure when we share this out on our official podcast and to the broader group that we'll include all the specifics on engagement. So
okay.
Rob, anything to add? George, anything to add in terms of how to
I was just going to note, if the storytelling and film part appeals to you, you can visit SustainaFest.org, which was placed in the chat. We're always looking for volunteers and funding to support the television, the next television series, Planet Lovejoy. Yeah, it's a time to commit to a cause, and we're here looking for help. So would love it if anyone cares to engage. And I also put, as you said, Warren, the Lovejoy Center for the University of Arizona. Alpha is more complicated. I know you'll have the opportunity to provide that information in a follow-up, And we'll make sure we get that to you as well.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Rob, anything from you?
Kata covered it.
Great. Well, I love that. Well, we're perfectly at 2:15. So if anybody else, I didn't see any other big questions come through. I hope that just means that we covered everything so beautifully. But I just really want to say thank you to each of you for allowing myself and the Climate First Bank team here to host this conversation and trusting us to host this conversation. So thank you. It was a real honor to lead this conversation and show your film, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word. So from my heart, thank you for allowing me in this space with you guys. But any last words of hope to share?
Just another thank you to the Climate First team for giving us this platform and for being a great partner. Hugely appreciate it.
Hear, hear.
Same here. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. And I wanted to end on this phrase that I'm gonna like put it on a Post-it note on my computer screen about how optimism is our only option. I really just that was the phrase that really stuck with me. So thank you for y'all and for your dad, Kata, that shared that message with all of us.
Yeah, of course.
Well, great. Well, thank you everyone for spending some of your Wednesday with us. Really appreciative. I look forward to sharing this with more folks via our podcast. But with that, thank you everyone and have a really great day.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.